Hey guys, welcome back to Exotic Car DIY. Today, going to be installing a lift on the E63. Okay, actually, here's what we're actually going to be doing. So, many of you guys saw my video where we put H&R springs on the E63, and it looks good. However, it's a little too low. They advertise a 3/4 inch drop with these springs. It's actually much closer to about like 2 1/4, almost 2.5 inches. And while that is good, it really lowers the front. So take a look at this. So really the only other options are out there. We could go to coilovers. K&W makes a kit for a little over $1,000. I think you can get, Rentec has also coilover kits that are adjustable height. I'm not ready to spin that right now. I'm not giving up on the H&R springs yet. So here's the plan. We got some neoprene and we have some spacers, and I'm simply going to add a hat on top of the coil right now to see if we can raise that nose up maybe about 5/8 of an inch. If it doesn't work, gonna have to switch to coilovers because it's just too low. So in my other video, I already kind of showed you how to do it. It's going to be basically the exact same process on this one, but we're just going to build a spacer to put on top of the spring and see if we can redeem these H&R springs. Because in reality, I know a lot of people for some reason complain about the ride on these. I haven't had any complaints on the rides. I think it rides great, and I do like the handling. I just simply think it's just too low. Obviously, some people like it slammed. If you're one of those people, then maybe these are the springs for you. So careful not to hit our brakes. Here we are back inside the wheel well, ready to get this strut back out. Like I said, it's actually not too many bolts. It just feels like I've done this 100 times. So we got to undo this sway bar mount here. That is a T40 and then an 18 millimeter. And then there are 2 bolts on the strut. Carefully remove all the brake lines and sensor wires off of it, and then just the 3 bolts at the top, and then the strut comes out. So let's go ahead and get started with that. So next thing we're going to do is go ahead and rotate this whole thing around to allow better access to these bolts with the impact. Again, you don't have to have an impact. So for this, we're going to be using an 18 on one side and then a 21 millimeter on this side with an impact. So once you have the nuts off the bolt, get here on the back side. I'm literally looking through my screen. Now we can just carefully unclip all these wires from their mounts so they can get safely out of the way for the removal of the strut. Up here on top of the strut, we're just going to use a 12 to undo the strut towers. Now I do have a jack underneath it just to help me lower and raise it out of the way so there's no pressure on this. We don't want to scrape up the paint under here at all. So now we can actually lower the jack down just a little bit more. And doing so should allow us enough room that we can lift the strut out easily. Again, make sure you got all your wires out of the way just to clear it. Just very cautiously remove it so you don't break any of the wires. Now we got to strut out. Okay, so now that the strut is out of the car, it's time to compress the spring. So last time I used those outside individual ones, that thing just seems like a death trap. So I'm trying this new one now. Again, you can rent these from AutoZone or buy them from Amazon. They have mixed reviews, so let's see how well it works or does not work. Never used one before. About right. Now it comes with these cables, I guess. I don't know how to use this, so don't consider this an instructional video of how to use these things, but the instructions just say they go through these. I understand how that makes sense, but anyway, let's give it a shot. Anyway, and this one seems a little more stable than the individual ones. Still, I don't trust anything like this. All right, you can see that the weight is completely taken off of it, so now it's time to undo the bolt at the tip. Okay, so while we have this bomb sitting here, I'm not going to get close to it, let me tell you about the plan. So on top of the spring already is a piece of rubber, pretty dense rubber, but it's very thin. It's only probably about an eighth inch thick total, maybe a 1/4 inch at its thickest. On top of that is the, I guess, the strut bearing that allows the strut to turn when you turn the wheel, and then it goes straight to metal. So what I did is I bought a sheet of 1/2 inch 70D neoprene. This stuff is as hard as like a car tire, I guess. It's the hardest neoprene they have. It's probably the same type of rubber here, I assume. Somebody's gonna correct me, I guess. So I cut it out in a circle, and then because this is textured like this, I made a washer out of 1/8 inch aluminum. And so what we're gonna do is just create a rubber spacer similar to this one, just thicker. I mean, there's already rubber there, so we're gonna put this on there with this and see how much we get when it's all done of raise on the suspension. So there's them installed like that. It's really good. Now we're going to slide it back on top. Tighten. And now simply diffuse the bomb. Now we should be able to loosen this fantastic contraption. Make sure the spring is lined up. All right, take out the safety clamps. I will admit that works a lot better than those external ones. Still, I don't like doing this at all, but whatever. If you're gonna do it, I definitely think that works better. Okay, so now we have the spring back on here. Don't forget to put your cap on, and this plastic dust cover or whatever this is. And it's ready to go back into the car. So you can see our spacer now on top there, and we're going to carefully guide this back into the spot it's supposed to go. So one thing I struggled with this whole time, or every time I've done this, is you got to push this up as you're trying to get everything in together. There's several ways you can do it. You can either put the screws on top first, or you can put the screws in here first. Now I'm just going to finish routing the brake lines and the sensors back to where in the original clips. And one more little tip. On the 2 bolts on the strut, put the nuts on there, but don't tighten them yet. I'll show you. Now with one hand I'm guiding the shock. The other hand I'm just going to carefully pump the jack to get these close, but we still want to be able to wiggle it just a little bit. And now we can thread our bolts. I like to make these just loose enough that you can kind of wiggle it around and line up the bolts up on exactly where the paint spot was before. Snug them up. Once these are tightened up, we can go back and tighten those bolts down below. So now all 3 bolts are tightened at the top, but I have not tightened the strut to knuckle or spindle bolts yet. And if you look in the Zentry instructions for all this, nowhere does it give you guidance on how to tighten those other than just the torque setting. But this is what I demonstrated in the alignment video. So if you have a jack underneath it, it's naturally going to be pushed like that. You can see how this moves. If you let it sag, it comes out here. So depending on where you tighten them, it actually does affect your alignment just because there's play in those bolt holes. And so I found that when I did it before, I must have had a jack underneath this, tighten it down like that. Well, guess what? You get a lot of negative camber, too much. But if you loosen those bolts, let it fall down to its natural all the way down, then tighten them, you almost get the alignment perfect. And so if you have any more questions, just check out that alignment video. I kind of show you how it's all done. Anyway, now we can tighten those bolts. And then of course, last we hook up the sway bar link. Okay, so now this side is all done. We're gonna switch over to the other side. Okay guys, and we're done. So the car's back in the wheels. It's actually been a full week. I made sure to put about 120 miles on the car, and just to make sure it didn't affect the alignment and there's no other drawbacks to this modification or whatever you call it. So remember, the goal was to raise it up. I was going for about 5/8 of an inch, and we didn't quite get that, but it's not a total fail on this video because I did get some. So conceptually, this proved that it worked. So I wrote down all the measurements stock. At stock, this was exactly 27 inches. And after the springs, it was 25 1/8 to 25 1/4. So I know playing with the camera messes up a little bit, but basically we're just a tad under 25 1/2. So we're close to the 5/8. We're closer to about 3/8 of an inch. So it did raise it up somewhat. If we come down here to the front, you can kind of see that we're no longer at the 3 1/4. We're closer to about 3 1/2, 3 5/8 here. So hopefully we'll now be able to maybe straddle squirrels on the road instead of plowing through them. I know that time-wise, for anybody looking to do this yourself, you're looking maybe how long is this going to take? I would say plan on at least a couple hours. For me, I've done this like 5 times now. Once do the H&R, then I had to replace the little bushings or whatever they call the bearings on top of the strut because one of mine went bad at 11,000 miles, and then twice to try to kind of figure out these springs. And so I've gotten kind of good at it, and you saw the time lapse. It probably only took me about 30 minutes to do one side, but for a first timer it might take a little bit longer. But either way, it's not that hard of a job. You guys can do it, and you know, the result is pretty good. Eventually maybe I will go get coilovers and just to see what they're like or whatever, and but for now I'm happy with the H&Rs, and thanks for watching, guys.